Up at 5:30. And we do a roll call.
Mayor Eichelers,
Here.
Councilor Bergner. Here. Councilor Richards.
Here.
Councilor Phillips.
Here.
Councilor Kurtz.
Okay, we have material here that Joe Payton has put together. And that'd be the best way to proceed.
Yeah, and I would just, the other thing I was going to mention was that you had your public hearing for this project back on October 12th of last year. So nearly a year later,
Almost a
we
revolution.
are at.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
It's a long
That was
path.
it, that was
So,
it.
yeah, what we set out, honestly, but it's a long path.
Okay, Joe, if you want to-
Well, I thought I'd start the discussion just by talking a little bit about where we're at in the project schedule. Just so we're kind of all on the same page, so everybody knows what to expect over the coming weeks and months. But I guess the first item on the agenda, at least, is tonight. And tonight, the plan is really for us to review the preliminary assessment role and how that information kind of came together. I want everybody here to be on the same page. Because very soon, later this week, we publish a notice for the public hearing that's discussed within also the resolution that you're considering tonight. So you have a resolution essentially having us send out notice and publish notice for the public hearing. The public hearing's on November 1st. But before we take those steps, it's very important that you guys know what we prepared, how the calculations have been done, how it affects individual parcels, and then what information is being provided to the property owners in terms of the assessment process, and then what does the assessment process look like, and how do we kind of move forward. The last thing that we really want to have is, we go to the public hearing and people start asking questions, and they will, but we kind of, the best approach is kind of a unified approach, and that you guys understand what's being done and why it's being done, and if there's any modifications that need to be made, we need to kind of understand that and make these before we send all this information out and have it published in the paper later this week. So again, this is our opportunity to get on the same page and understand the information that we've assembled. Fortunately, a lot of the information, we're just building on things that we've done in the past. There hasn't been wholesale changes in anything. In fact, almost everything is essentially what we presented in the public hearing last year, literally a year ago. And so with that, that's the point of tonight, and that's what we have on the agenda tonight. You'll see also on the agenda, or on the schedule, October 7th. That's when the published notice gets submitted to the paper. It would get published in the paper the next 2 weeks. And the notices are attached to the resolution for publication, as well as the mail notice. The notice for publication and the mail notice are a little different. We'll see that tonight. We'll focus, I think, more on the mail notice because that is more informative than the published notice. And it also contains all the same information that's in the published notice.
And it will be very specific because it's done through mail merge. So it will be very specific to that specific property owner.
Right. And so we are, having prepared all this, it takes, there's 510 parcels that will get noticed of at least an assessment, and that will get mailed out based on the schedule Friday. So we've essentially assembled the notices, we've assembled the spreadsheet. You have all that in front of you. The mail merge is in process. They're going to hit the button tomorrow morning if I give them the green light to start producing the notices, and so everything can kind of come together. It obviously takes some time.
So the point really correct me if I'm wrong, but any questions that you're gonna have, tonight's the night to ask them. So that we can get them resolved, and then going forward, the answer any resident would ask any of us is gonna be the same.
So to that point, I'm worried that Carl will.
Noted.
I don't
Maybe
think,
he'll be here next Tuesday night either.
Okay.
I don't think he'll be here next Tuesday night either.
Yeah, I thought it was only gonna be the October regular meeting, but.
It's
So I
unfortunate.
expected
Oh.
him to.
it's very concerning to me, because I think for that November 1st meeting, it could be perceived as, if he starts asking questions that we've already discussed and decided on that night, it could be perceived as we're not on a unified front.
You know, maybe the way to address that is either for Sonny or I or both of us to sit down with Carl and go through the information. You know, I don't know about his availability, but I can make myself available if you want to try to facilitate that meeting. Because, you know, it's just, you will all get questions. We will have that public hearing, and based on past experience, that will be at times ugly. You know, people, certain people are just not gonna want to hear anything that you have to say, and plus there's a cost based into this. So, and those costs are the same, but we can prepare for that. We can handle that. But you guys need to prepare for that as well. Okay. So that said,
So
we
let me
are.
ask- Let me ask one second. So is Carl out on something medical that he won't be here this one and the next one? Do we know? Not that we want to bring it up, but
I didn't ask.
okay.
We scheduled him with all of us, you being able to attend, so.
Mm,
Well,
I think
actually,
it's
it
not
was
unreasonable.
sched- it was
That's
based
the
on
last
the
council
schedule.
meeting.
But it was based on the schedule.
we
Because
consider
it's
our last
tight,
meeting.
yeah.
I don't have any problem with meeting with Carl. It is, you know, when he's available and we can go through the information.
And the other thing is it's recorded. Right? This-
That's true.
But who knows how our code will pick up.
And fortunately, Carl was, you know, he's been involved. He was on the council last October.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh,
2 years ago.
was it 2 years ago? Okay. So we had two council, we had two people. No, well, two public hearings, and he wasn't on the first one either. That was like in March of the same year.
So he was not involved in any of this.
Okay. Well,
His
that's,
previous term as a city council member, there was Tuesday nights that he would be at car auctions sometimes. Because his business, he's retired now.
So I would say, let's just all speak up. So it picks up in the recording, and I would ask him to, and I will ask him to listen to it.
Yeah.
Watch it.
And I'll make an effort to try and facilitate something so that we could walk them through the
Oh, yeah.
numbers too. Because, you know, that's basically what tonight is about, right? Is almost a one-on-one. It's like 1-on-5 or 2-on-5, you know, kind of go forward. So to really get the best understanding of how this plays out. And, in my view, and I should just shut up and let you talk, but in my view, I think the biggest hurdle that we need to, be prepared for is that these assessments actually begin before the project is even activated.
And I think that's important in the why. Because I've already had conversations with people asking. Because they're hearing that it's gonna start ahead of time and explaining why. I think it's it's a good thing, and I've explained why we do it, so. Just one of those things.
And it makes sense, you know, you start borrowing money and you have to start to make payments on that money. That's essentially what the city has done. And so, you know, that's the way that's usually funded. And it's not, you know, it is consistent with what we've been kind of talking about. Even at the last 2 public hearings on the project, this information was out there. At that point in time, we didn't have the exact date. Now we do. So what we're kind of focusing on is that November 1st meeting. But after the November 1st meeting, like we talked about before, people have the right to file objections. There's a 30-day period that they can do so. After that 30 days is up, we'll certify the assessment roll to the county, and they'll begin to incorporate it into the property taxes for 2023. Property taxes for 2023, as you guys know, are essentially due in May and October. That's how this moves forward. So that's what I have here, and I think the next best thing to talk about.
One question on your schedule. In parentheses, you have a 30-day appeal period. Begins with after resolution is approved. So what is that appeal process? What's constituted as an appeal?
Well, they have the ability to file in district court.
Yeah, I think it's defined here. Yeah. But does it go through Sunny? I wasn't clear when I read it.
No,
Does
they
it go
file
through
in
Sunny,
this.
or they just go right to the court?
So 2 things have to happen. At the meeting, they need to orally or file a written objection with either Sunny or the mayor. And if they don't do that at the meeting, then you can't appeal. Supposedly. And then if they do that, after that, they have 30 days to file in district court. And it's kind of talked about within the information that we have there.
Is that the same process for deferment?
No.
No.
So, and I'm gonna say that's the biggest difference. An appeal is actually a court proceeding versus a deferment is internally
Essentially an application for the city to
yeah.
consider.
an administrative kind of thing that ultimately comes to council, but we have to develop the application and criteria.
Okay.
And I should go make copies of that sample.
Yeah, I sent a sample. I think a lot of that is dictated by the statute, but
Yeah.
not something that I know a lot about, frankly.
Yeah.
So
we don't have that currently, but we will before.
we don't have the application, but the information about the deferment and what the qualifications are included in the publication of the mail notice. That's dictated by state statute.
It just said 65 or older, I thought.
Well, no, military service and then disability as well is considered. And so let's jump to the public hearing on proposed assessment, the project summary and handout.
Page 2.
Could be page 2. And so what this is you guys are all familiar with the public hearing handout that we prepared for the October 2021 meeting. This is the same document. I made I took some information out of it that maybe wasn't as important, for example, where the project would impact, those types of things, just to try to make it a little bit more concise. It's already 4 pages plus a map, so it's fairly long, but it contains some important information. And I added some information to that. So a lot of the information in here is very similar to what we had previously. I would like to highlight a few things for you. On the first page, item 5, the project costs. The project costs, as we talked about, we don't have final construction costs at this point. We have contracts and we have we're monitoring the construction costs. We know what the non-construction costs are, very close to what that are. And we also have a 2.5% contingency. And looking at that information, the best information is that the projections that we presented in 2021 are accurate. And that is the best information that we have, so we're going to use those project costs. So the project cost that was estimated in 2021 was $46.194 million. Since then, I guess the only difference is we've added some sewer and water services properties, whether it's a lot split or somebody asked for additional services. I think there's 6 additional water services and 3 sewer services. That equates to about $54,000 in costs. And so I've added that as a separate line here, so you see 0.054 million. So that yields a total project cost of $46.2848 million. That information is summarized in the next table. So if you turn to page 3 and you look at that table, you can see the project costs. There's a row of project costs there based on the different elements of the project. So the wastewater treatment facility, the Orinoco Estates, wastewater treatment facility cost share, the trunk sewer, the lateral sewer, and the water main, and then of course the total project cost. And then the second row of that table illustrates the grants that we secured and how those grant dollars were disseminated amongst the various project elements. So the project cost minus the grant dollars is essentially the local share. Okay, now I did add the third row. That's that plus additional lateral connections. So those 3 sewer connections and 6 water connections. That's that $54,000. So that's the only thing that's changed in this project cost scenario from what we had previously presented.
So help me with those. Is included in that, like the gentleman on First Street on the west side, is that included in these additional ones that weren't factored in? You know who I'm talking about?
Talk about the Millers.
Is that what the name is? They're building the
No, it would not include them.
Okay.
Because they are, they were previously included. They had a little star on their lot, but no, it would not include.
But it wasn't developed, obviously.
Right.
So who, help me understand the additional ones. How did those come about?
For example, on
Or did
Fifth
we
Street,
add?
we added them.
Oh, okay.
We added them where the property owner requested it. There are a number of them. So on Fifth Street, for example, we had that recent lot split.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that lot split, we talked to the property owner, the vacant lot needs a sewer and water service.
Yes.
So that's one. Mr. Keene owns a lot in downtown Orinoco across from the VFW. Well, post-construction, he asked, can this get served? Yeah. The Hawks property, that is one that, you guys know where that is?
Yep.
That was one larger property that's subsequently been split and has multiple uses. Well, they had one service, one sewer, one water service previously for all of those, including the auto dealership that got split off. Well, we're adding 2 more water services there so that, we can have one go to the business, we can have one go to the house, we can have one go to the other business to the south. Those types of scenarios are the scenarios that, where we're adding a service. And so that project cost is basically the cost of the lateral sewer and water times the services. So it really doesn't affect the assessment amount. The assessment amount stay the same. but the project costs increased by that amount because the mains and stuff are already in. We're just adding a service, lateral to the existing mains that were already incorporated in the project cost.
And it's one for us because we get more users.
Yes, and they need to be served.
Yeah.
So it's, you know,
So just so I'm understanding then, the gentleman or Miller's on First Street, that would really increase our project cost, wouldn't it? Because we have to have that hookup. Granted, he pays for his, but, or are we saying he has to pay
No,
for that
we already have-
that main piece?
the Millers are right here. This
Yeah.
is from the feasibility report. They had a star and a dot, so they were getting sewer and water service to begin with. Now you'll notice that it stops. Well, in fact, it was planned to go down here, but they built up here, so it stops at the right of way line.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. So it was counted.
Oh, okay,
It
okay.
was
I thought you
planned.
said it
Nothing's
wasn't counted. Okay, okay.
All right, so
Makes
that
sense.
wasn't one of the 7 or 6 additional, 3 additional sewer services in one, you know.
Okay.
It wasn't one of them. It was already counted in the, 494
Yeah.
connections and, 122
Okay.
or whatever.
Okay.
So there.
But his that's I'm thinking, it's his grinder that wasn't counted, right?
No, it was.
Oh, it
Well,
was.
no,
Because we're making
no,
him.
we're not giving him a grinder
Oh, okay.
because he was at the time considered an undeveloped lot and frankly, still an undeveloped lot because the house isn't finished.
Yeah, I'm just trying to sort it out because
Yep.
I know there's talk on that one already,
Sure.
and if we're doing others, what's the rationale?
Mhm.
And I want to understand it in case I get hit with the question.
Right. And the other ones that we're adding are gravity. They're not low pressure and the 6 obviously are water services. So
Okay.
there's some differences.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's really where that information comes from. And again, this is largely, the numbers haven't changed from what we originally presented. The basis of assessment, well, the assessments for sewer and water services are based on equivalent residential units. And this is based on essentially the policy that we adopted several years ago. It's incorporated in the appendix of the feasibility report. And we've presented this information over and over, single family houses, 1 ERU. Everybody is considered at least 1 ERU regardless of how much water they use. Large water users, people that use over 5,000 gallons, on average over the winter months, we do a calculation. So we look at their water use in December, January, and February typically. And, we divide that average water use by 5,000 gallons, which is what a typical residential unit uses. And, if they use 10,000 gallons in that period of time, they're 2 ERU.
Mhm.
Okay, and those calculations we can talk about later. The other thing that we kind of do is we look at multifamily units, apartments, mobile homes, twin homes, duplexes. Each unit is 0.8 ERU. So if you have a duplex, it's 1.6 ERU. Or you have a house that has essentially 2 apartments in it, it's 1.6 ERU. And we have a number of them like that. Okay. And then I guess the last point is parcels that are over 1 ERU are not charged for lateral sewer beyond the initial ERU. So they are charged, and we'll get into it a little bit later, but the sewer fee, the assessment is based on the wastewater treatment facility, plant investment fee, trunk sanitary sewer availability fee, and then the lateral fee. And the reason that the lateral fee is essentially stagnant, or we charge them 1 ERU regardless of how many ERU they really have, is it's a way to frankly reduce costs slightly for the larger users, but on the other hand, for example, Tilly's, we extend 4 or 6 inch pipe to them to service them via gravity. Well, you know, it doesn't really cost us any more to do that. Whereas it does cost us more to pump their wastewater and to size the pipes accordingly to do that. And construct a treatment facility and build capacity, and you know, it costs more to convey and treat that wastewater, so they're being charged the trunk and wastewater fees based on their total ERUs, but the lateral sewer is just basically one. It's per connection. So that's the change there. And so in total, you can see in the next table, there's 510 ERUs. That's the same. There are 497 connections. We previously estimated 493. And then the total phase 1B and phase 1C, well, 1B is the connections in 2030, and the 1C is essentially all the future development over the next 30 years, or 20 years. And so there's a total of 1,806 ERUs. That hasn't changed. Jump to the next table, you can see how the assessments are calculated. So basically, the assessments are the project costs, the city's local share of the project costs divided by the total number of ERUs. Okay, and so if you look, for example, on the wastewater treatment facility, the plant investment fee, this first table that we looked at, you'll see that the local share of the project cost is about $6.211 million. You divide that by the 1,806 ERUs, the total number of connections over the next 20 years, you get $3,439. And you do the same thing for the trunk sewer and the lateral sewer, and you see that the total assessment is $8,817. That's the same number we've been talking about for over a year. One thing that did change is that our loan term, we were able to qualify for a 30-year loan as opposed to a 20-year loan, and our interest rate is favorable. Our interest rate on our loan is 1.047%. The interest rate that we charge people for assessments is 1% over that. That's what the city's policy is. And the reason for that is that 1% essentially helps us administer the loan. You will get an audit. It takes time to deal with this. This is the way to essentially cover those administrative costs.
I have a question. So like on the first one, or I'm sorry, the lateral service, it's estimated at 497, and if I look back on this other one, phase 1 was 510, 497 is in parentheses.
Yeah, so 497 is the number of connections, and so on the lateral sewer, like we talked about in that basis of assessment, the last bullet point, parcels with over 1 ERU are not charged for lateral sewer beyond the initial 1 ERU.
So what was the number 510?
The number of ERUs.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, Tilly's
Right.
might have multiple ERUs,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
but you know, a single family residential is just one. So that's the kind of dichotomy.
So you know what the difference in those two numbers, the 510 and the 497, you can identify.
Yes, it's in the assessment roll.
Okay.
So when we look at the assessment roll, you'll see every parcel, and you'll see the connection is 1.0, and then the number of ERUs might be 1.0, or it might be 2.6, or whatever that is. And so then at the bottom of the spreadsheet, you'll see that it ties to these numbers.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So back to the table for the assessment, that $1,817. I did include this, you know, 1 ERU at 30 over the 30-year term at that 2.047%. If you break that down on a monthly basis, it equates to about $33.02 a month with interest over 30 years. Now, they're not paying on a monthly basis. That's just, that's just for, because people like to know what it costs me on a monthly basis, okay? The same information has been provided for the lateral sewer. Or, I'm sorry, the lateral water and then next table down. So the fee assessment for the water is basically this 898,000 divided by the total number of ERUs, which is now 30.6. And so that equates to an assessment of $6,875 per ERU. And that loan is over a 20-year term at a slightly higher interest rate. The city's loan rate is 1.252%. So we assess people, and assessments have an interest rate of 2.252%. And so that equates over a 20-year term to about $36 on a monthly basis.
So in the case of the water system, we don't have a trunk lines, are all one lateral. Is that right?
We calculated the assessment for a lateral sewer only. And so we looked at lateral sewer prices. The city is covering all of the trunk water main costs. We made that decision when we went through the feasibility report and we talked about it. For example, these people aren't being asked to pay for essentially their share of the water tower or the wells. We talked about the impact to the property owners and the overall cost, and we were trying to minimize that impact. And so we do discuss that within the feasibility report, but that was the decision made at that time, and that's why the assessment is what it is. Otherwise, frankly, it would be higher.
But this is still per year.
ERU is. And so the total amount of the phase 1A wastewater system and associated water main improvement costs, the local share is about $2.6 million. And that $2.6 million is about 13.4% of the $46.248 million project cost. So what we're assessing is essentially 13.4% of the project cost. And so you probably ask yourself, well, where does the other $6 million of the local share come from? Well, that comes from future connections over the next 20 years within phase 1B and 1C. Phase 1B are the remaining properties within the city that are developed, and phase 1C are the developing properties over the next 20 years. Then we kind of move on to the schedule, the project schedule. I think I'm going to add a line here to this. Obviously, the first item is the public hearing. That's where we're at tonight. The second line I think I'm going to add is certification of assessments to the county auditor. That would be December 2nd. So 30 days after the city adopts the assessment roll by resolution, would be the date that Sunny would certify the assessments. And then the first payment would be due within the property taxes for the assessments in May of 23. And then I included a little bit of information about construction in terms of substantial completion and final completion of the project. I don't want the meeting to devolve into a discussion about the construction project, or we'll be there all night. The meeting is talking about the assessments and that piece. I'd be happy to talk about construction, but not in that, I'll do it a little bit, but it's really not in everybody's best interest to sit there and talk about, there's a branch on my tree that got hit, or,
Just cost.
Well, There are issues, they're legitimate, but they're in this setting with this many
Yeah.
people, and we're focusing on our statutory requirements for the 429 process. That's really what we want to focus on.
Yeah.
And there's so much information here to talk about. I want to focus on that. And I don't mean to be rude or disrespectful to people, but I will say this at the meeting, but be happy to meet with people afterwards or in a different venue, but this isn't the time or place to talk about those types of questions.
I agree, because I think there's gonna be a lot of, may not be, but this is all about cost. This is what's gonna hit their pocketbook.
Yeah,
That's
and
what's
understanding the
important.
process and why and how,
Yeah,
that's what we're obligated to convey at this meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. Next page. So the first 3 pages are essentially what we talked about a year ago. Those numbers have changed very minutely up till now. The last page here, page 4 of the handout, really comes from the mailed notice. And I do want to just take some time to, it's literally verbatim from the mailed notice. They've already gotten, or they will have already gotten this information in the mail. But I think it warrants having me touch on it and maybe explain it a little better, because the language it's right out of the League of Minnesota Cities
mhm.
guidance. And it's a little hard to read.
Yeah. And I think too, I think that's a good thing. If you can just kind of bullet point some of the very important things, just to say it in your own words, I think they'll get more out of it.
I think so too. Obviously, I'll be careful not to misstate anything. It's written like this for a reason.
Right.
The attorneys have probably put this together. So I'm not gonna say that I know more, or but I can try to,
It's an interpretation, right?
well, just,
Some
talk
respects.
a little maybe more plain language about what this really means. And so there are options for prepayment, and in general, if people wanna prepay before this assessment is certified to the county auditor, and that's one of the reasons I want to put that date in the schedule, being December 2nd, they can come in and prepay their assessment, and they would prepay that to the city administrator. And so that prepayment, somebody has to take, and she has to package them up and send them to PFA, because they get deducted from your loan. You can't keep that money and make principal and interest payments over the years. Can't do that. It goes back to them.
Mhm.
And you will be told that 50 times. And then also, if a couple years go by and you want to pay off your assessment, well, you can come in and do that. You'll pay interest through that full year, but then we can figure out what that payment is, and you can essentially cut a check and make payment and be done with paying interest. Now, that will happen when properties change hands, people die. Some people will just don't want to have debt. But again, the thing that people should also remember is this is a 30-year loan at 2%. None of us have mortgages at 30 years for 2%.
Mhm.
We might have for a little bit more than that, but that's a pretty darn good rate. That's pretty attractive. So
Joe, that's one question that came up to me, and I couldn't really answer it. What if, because you talked about if properties change hands, what does that really mean? Because my thought, and I don't know, is okay, if I were to sell my property and I have an assessment against it for this, then then I have to come in and pay it off, or can it go with the next person that buys it?
I was saying generally it gets paid off. That's what people normally do.
Mhm.
Because it's a negotiation, it's a liability against the property. But On the other side of it, you know, the assessment's against the parcel.
Right.
And against the parcel owner, and I believe that you don't have to pay it off. Sonny, do you have a better understanding of that? But
Well,
you
go
don't
with the
have to,
sale
it's just
of the-
90% of the time it gets paid off as part of that negotiation process.
It's a negotiating piece for the,
It is,
for the purchase.
Yeah.
for the buyer and
Yeah.
seller.
Because I thought it could go with the sale of the home, where, hey, okay, if you buy it, I'm not gonna pay for it, you
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 assume it.
assume it.
It can.
I believe
Yeah.
that can happen.
I'm more familiar with them being paid off and probably, but it is a negotiating item that, because they do an assessment search.
Yeah.
So it's gonna come up.
Mhm.
And then at the title company, your purchase agreement should define who's gonna pay for that. And sometimes it's split, sometimes, you know, it's a 20-year assessment. You live there for 2 years, you're gonna do, you know, your portion of it and the buyer could, you know, so however you negotiate that. Yeah,
It's good to
I-
know, I mean, because
I
I know a neighbor that's moving, and this actually just came up over the weekend.
yeah,
They're
but it's not yet
Within-
pending yet.
within the next 14 months, and they're saying,
Okay.
how does this work then,
Yeah.
if this is already in play?
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
and
well, and that, you know, becomes,
because I assumed it could be kind of a bargaining chip where, you know, you could assume it, or it stays with me and I pay it off. But
yeah,
that's why I asked, and I just told them to come to the hearing.
so the hearing. Well, they should check with their realtor.
Mhm.
Yeah, or call it. That's what they would call it.
Oh, they would.
So one thing that occurs to me is maybe we should check with the county. Maybe they would understand that process. We should do two things. We should also call the county and tell them that we expect a certified assessment roll on December 2nd. They're gonna get 510 parcels. It's, you know, a fair amount of work from their perspective, so
Right,
making sure that they know what's coming is a good idea.
Yeah.
And know our schedule, but also maybe they can help us answer that question. 'Cause I, like you, I'm pretty confident that it can be assumed by the seller if, you know, all the things, the seller and the buyer agree and, you know, the other, you know, your bank accepts that
Mhm.
additional liability and whatever.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I, that's not my, I don't know for sure, but I think
I'll get that answer.
that's probably likely.
Yeah.
And then of course, we list interest rates and different things like that within this. The right to appeal. You do have the right to appeal. And we talk about this is verbatim out of the league's guidance per the 429 statute. You know, you can essentially go to district court and within 30 days, assuming that you file, that's this next limitation on appeal, you at the meeting have to submit to the presiding officer or the city administrator a written,
It's written, okay, that's what the McCoy question is. Written.
well, written or, I think it's written or oral, what does it say here?
Doesn't say.
Written objection.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's written. A written objection. And so frankly, I've been involved in cases where they've appealed that and they didn't file a written objection and the judge just said, so what?
And they're here to appeal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's what the statute says and they ignored it. I've seen that happen before.
It probably just depends on the judge.
I think you're right. But, you know, so there's a 30-day period to essentially file in district court and people can do that. And so what the statute really kind of talks about there is that the assessment can't be, you know, you can't appeal because I didn't want water or I don't like where my service is, or you didn't reconstruct my driveway culvert correctly or whatever. That's not how this works. Basically, it is the assessment equal to or less than the increase in property value that we project or that we can document your property will benefit from. So if I assess you $5,000 and I can only prove after going through a process that your property value increased by $2,000, well, the judge is going to reduce the assessment by $3,000 to $2,000. Now, do I think that that's likely? Hell no. I think that you could probably justify 2 to 3 times the assessment here that we're giving people, and other people have. We have the luxury of having received a subsidy to the tune of about 76%, if memory serves. That's a huge luxury. And then, in addition to that, the way we're kind of structuring assessments, they're only paying 13.4% of the project cost. And if we can't prove that they're receiving benefit from that, we can't do a whole lot. And then you also look at things like, if we did just the street reconstruction, the assessments could be in this realm. Not everybody's getting a new street, but a lot of people are. So people are really getting sewer, water, and street. And all of those costs are lumped into, well, the sewer and street is lumped into the sewer cost, and the water cost is the water cost. Okay? So, do I expect people to potentially file? Maybe a handful. Do I expect them to be successful? No, I don't. How does that process, what does that look like? Well, essentially, there'll be people offering testimony at a court hearing, and your star witness is probably going to be your appraiser, and, I will undoubtedly be part of that proceeding. But, we would have to do pre and post appraisal on that property, and we could spend some money doing that.
So what happens if they lower it? Then where does that, because someone has to pay for it.
City pays for it. Comes with project cost.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then it's dispersed back through the taxes, right?
No.
No?
No.
So,
The utility picks it up.
okay.
And so we went through a process of an assess. Now, I suppose we could go through and adjust everybody's assessment, and that would be a nightmare. So we won't do that. We would handle it if just like you would if, you're a utility, you're a sewer utility, and you're making interest payments on this. And there's a lot of projections here in terms of the number of years that'll be developed. And, even we've got a little cushion in the project cost. We've got some contingency. We can absorb some of this. But if we can't, we exceed that, the best way to really deal with that is through the utility. You're billing the users fees, and, you can increase the monthly charge, the monthly base charge by $3 a month for all the ERUs. And then the other thing that you can do is push more of the costs on the developers that pay the plant investment fee and the sewer availability fee. And frankly, we've got a calculation here, but we should push that envelope as far as we can push it. Because I don't think it's going to matter. And those costs can come in and essentially subsidize the utility. Now, we don't need to make those decisions yet. We've made the decisions assuming that we're not doing that. That's what the cash flow projections are based on. They're based on 10 houses a year and the rates that we have here. But if I'm in your seats, as we talk about availability charges for development moving forward, I think that we take that sewer availability charge, SAC, and the plant investment fee, PIF, and we increase them 10%, 20%, 25%. You know, we want to make it still, we want to be competitive, but, you know, you can help recover some of those costs, and you'll see other cities. It just,
Well, and I could go out on a limb here. My guess is that I agree with you. You know, there's clearly sufficient benefit for the assessment to each property. Now, if it goes before a court or a judge, either way, jury or, I'm guessing they get to choose which way.
I've never seen a jury, I've always had it just a judge.
Okay. The likelihood that they would totally wipe out the assessment is unlikely. If anything, they might reduce it, but again, if we're at a fraction of
Yes.
what it could be, I
That's why I
don't see-
feel comfortable with it, you know, and,
Yeah.
you know, for example, if you were to replace a mound system on one of these parcels, it's $25,000. You know, if you have room to do that.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't, you know, and so what's the alternative,
Right.
you know? So anyway, we've got that going for us. In a lot of this discussion, we don't need to have at the public hearing, or I wouldn't have at the public hearing. I will answer questions, I'll provide information, and I'll be forthright with that. But this isn't something that we need to convolute the discussion with.
Right.
So that gets us to the deferment of assessments. This is the language out of the toolkit from the league. And you can kind of see that it applies for folks that are over 65. Have disabilities, are members of the military, and basically can prove need. And so with that, I would recommend that, I did bring a copy of that, I imagine you have a copy too, but I would think, and this is what that kind of looks like for Maple Plain. We do work there. It's a fairly straightforward application, but it does require that people provide some sensitive information in terms of driver's license, taxes, information about the hardship, those types of general things. And over those 30 days after the assessment hearing, we might get some of these. Frankly, in 2019, we got none. I thought we would at that point too. 2009, with the water project. So we don't get a lot of these, but there are certainly some people that could qualify. And we need to, per the statute, make that available. And so what happens if you would qualify for a hardship or a deferment? And so essentially it defers payment. The principal continues to accumulate interest. When something happens that changes that deferment status, maybe the person passes away, maybe they sell the property, you know, maybe their financial situation changes. Well, at that point, that assessment's due with interest. You don't get to go back on the 30-year payment plan.
So the assessment up to that point is due.
No, the assessment's due.
Total
Total amount.
Oh.
I believe that's the case. And so there is some disincentive to applying for a deferment. But on the other hand, for example, a lot of times it'll be older people who aren't on their fixed income, and the deferment might work from their 85th to 90th birthday, and unfortunately they pass away, and at that point they don't care. Their estate settles the assessment, the property is going to transfer anyway. There should be money to pay that. That's the most common scenario, right?
So the assessment that would go with the property and the new owners,
No,
You have to pay it.
their
They would-
state would pay it.
their state would,
And if there
With interest.
was nothing to pay it with.
They'd likely sell the property.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
okay,
okay.
it's covered.
right, that's what I meant by the estate settlement.
Yeah.
Now, every situation is different, and certainly there are some hardships, but this is a vehicle to help people
It's an option.
who truly can't handle this. And so what happens to the principal and interest payment? Well, you know, the city essentially covers it, or not the city, the utility, sewer utility, or the water utility, depending on where the assessment is. They cover that assessment, or the principal and interest payment that it would essentially be making back to PFA. You cover that through the utility, through utility fees. So there are mechanisms to do that, but it doesn't come with no pain. I mean, because the rest of the users essentially carry that.
So if that was to occur, for the water or the sewer going forward, there would be a line item on each individual bill of
I don't think it would be a line item.
because like our well is $5, we have maybe other line items on that water bill, but, so how would that fit into this? You have to somehow calculate that into the monthly user fee for everybody, right?
I think you have so much money coming in and so much money going out of the utility, and, you know, if you can't make your payments, you need to raise your rates.
For everybody.
I don't know. I don't handle that part.
Well,
Yes.
and it does speak to the fee schedule that you look at every year. And we are looking at that, to include some additional items that you haven't had before perhaps, and then making those adjustments too, to.
Well, and you'll get an annual, you'll see where the utility's at with your annual audit, and you can do a utility rate study if you need to help forecast that stuff. I wouldn't expect a lot of deferments, but you could get a handful. And I, you know, they are what they are. People need help. You know, there's legitimate people out there that truly could, but I'm just saying, in the past, in my experience, I don't see many, almost none. I don't know if you've dealt with it before too, but
Not a lot of them.
but the statute allows it. I think we need to accommodate it based on the statute, and so people have 30 days to file an application with the city, and then the council would consider it. So there you go. And then in terms of other things, this is already 4 pages. You know, so I kind of reference, go look at the city's website. There's all kinds of information out there. Give me a call if you want to. I would be glad to answer questions via phone or email. Or, you know, look at the website. We can post information out there, and then there's of course a map, similar map to what we had in the past. I did add those individual lots that we added.
So Joe, just going, you know, in the right of appeal and the deferment, we talked about 30 days after the confirmation of assessment. So with our dates that we know now, can we identify what that date is versus?
December 2nd.
Pardon me?
December 2nd.
I'm sorry.
December 2nd. So
Oh,
November
okay, I'm
1st, 30 days is December 2nd.
Okay. Thank you.
That might even be 31. So it's the day after the 30th day.
I see. Got it.
So are you asking if that can be added in here?
Well, that might, because not everybody's gonna have a sheet, are they, schedule? I think it'd be good if we can put the date and add a sentence to what the toolkit already has, but just a confirmation of what that date is on both 3 and 5.
Well, and you've already, we've added on,
Yeah, I'm gonna add the certification of assessments by the county auditor on December 2nd.
right,
this is a draft, this is something I mentioned that I would add. I've got a few little edits here that I want to try to clean this up a little bit before we.
So would that also be the deadline? Would you want to, is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Also add a line for deadline for appealing or have to apply
January
for?
1st.
Well, the deferment language says that you have until it's certified by the county auditor
Okay.
to submit your application, which is December 2nd.
Okay.
So I believe it says that in the deferment. Actually, within 30 days of confirmation of the assessment. So I would think that 30 days of confirmation of the assessment is when the city adopts the assessment roll, which is scheduled for November 1st. So I would have a PowerPoint presentation that would pretty reasonably follow this only with a little bit more information. Trying to highlight some of the finer points of things that I think people would want to understand. But we would physically make this available on the website to people. Like that literally come to the meeting as kind of a discussion tool or whatever.
And I would suggest too, to have some hard copies for those who don't.
Oh, yeah. And we'll post it on the website and,
Yeah.
All that good stuff. So that gets us to the assessment roll. Okay. Unless you guys had questions on that. How are we doing for time? So, nice pictures. These pictures are slightly updated, but very similar to what you see on the wall behind you, right? So on these maps, just like the ones that you have here, we've got, the maps are color coded. So these, for example, are multifamily. The yellow ones are just residential. These are businesses. Okay, so it's color coded per land use. And then people that have a blue star means they get a water service and a water assessment. If they have a dot, they get a sewer assessment. If they, and so there are different colored dots. So some dots are, well, the red dots on this one are single family, the blue dots are multifamily, the green dots are multifamily. The blue dots are undeveloped parcels that get assessment. And then there are commercial properties, I think if there's a dot on a parcel, they get a sewer assessment. There's a star on a parcel, they get a water assessment. Okay, and then you can also see the utilities. Blue lines are sanitary or the water main. The green lines are gravity sewer. The pink lines are force main sewer. And then these individual lines, the black lines are the services going to or into the individual parcel. And so you'll also note that there's a truncated parcel ID number. That parcel ID number feeds into the spreadsheet. Okay, and so you can look at any one of these parcels and find them on the spreadsheet based on this number. We don't want to list people's names, do that stuff, but it is in the spreadsheet. So you'll note that. And I guess the other thing to kind of note is there are a number of vacant parcels, undeveloped parcels that are developable. Those are the white ones. They're indicated by the count here. They've got the blue square and number. So in this area, there are 7 of them. And so you'll also see that, we talked about this, they get a sewer and water service. They get a set. They're undeveloped parcel. Okay. So I've broken the project down into 9 zones. And so the spreadsheet breaks the project down into 9 zones because there's 510 parcels, and it's just easier, right, to be able to find somebody. And so that's kind of what you have. And so this is a great tool if you have somebody with a question as to, what's going on, because you can see pretty much everything if you know what you're looking at here. So that is something that you're going to want to keep handy. Now let's look at the assessments. So these are the assessments. The first page is a summary of all of the assessments. Okay, and so that breaks it down by the 9 zones. And those zones, of course, correlate to these 9 zones in the graphic. Okay, and so, for example, zone 1 is area F. That's the area south of the bridge. There are 68 connections, 30 sewer connections, 31 water connections. There's 71.1 equivalent residential units for the sewer. There's 31 equivalent residential units for the water. And then you can see how the different fees are calculated. So the plant investment fee, sewer availability charge, lateral charge, total charges for the wastewater, and then the water system lateral sewer assessment. That's the second to last column, the WCC column. And then the very last column is the sewer and water assessments combined. Okay? And so that formula, and you can see up above, these are the assessments that we calculated and talked about in the public hearing handout, right? Project cost divided by ERUs is assessments, okay? And so these are applied throughout, and so you can see this information on the top of every one of the individual assessment pages, okay? So turn the page. Page 2 of the assessments. If you're like me, you gotta put your glasses on to see this. I tried to make this as readable as possible, but there is a lot of information we have to have on here. And so, you'll notice on the very left side, there's a count for each one of these areas, just number of parcels, okay? And then after that, there's this Olmsted County PIN number. That's the number on the map. That PIN number is essentially the same number as the parcel ID number, at least the last 5 digits of it are the same, okay? So that parcel ID number is critical to the property owner. And then you'll have things like, the next column is the adjoining parcels, because some people have multiple parcels, but it's really one homestead. So we're just, really leveling the assessment against the main parcel, but there are adjoining parcels, and we're just numbering that. And then you'll have the parcel address. So that's where physically the street address of that parcel is. Some parcels aren't developed, so they don't have parcel addresses. Then you'll have the taxpayer name, the second taxpayer name, the taxpayer address. So that's where the assessments are getting mailed to, not necessarily to the property, because not all. And not everybody lives on, the people that rent and whatever don't live there. So the next item we really have there is, you can see land use. So land use is important from the standpoint of, I've highlighted non-single family residential land use. And why did I do that? Because those are the people that receive assessments that are different than one ERU, okay? And so I do that because I want you to kind of understand what the assessments are based off of. So the first one is a great example of one in red there. Well, the first one is the church. The church doesn't use any water. I think that's great. For the Presbyterian church, they use very little water. And so I guess I should also point out the last page of this, the last page of the whole packet, page 15, is the ERU calculation for non-residential parcels. And so you can see lots of information in here in the rows or in the columns The rows indicate the different non-residential users. And you'll note that some of these on the very bottom are phase 1B. They're not pertinent to this, but we use them to calculate ERUs for phase 1B because obviously we need to know that. But for example, if you look at the various columns, you'll see water use from 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. So the ones that we're most interested in is the average water use from 2020, 2021 between December and February. And we use that time period because people aren't irrigating. And so we're looking at water use when people aren't irrigating, but there are some exceptions to that. For example, the Tilly's RV rental place, well, they don't use any water in the winter. So I can't use that. So I didn't. I used an average over several years per month on a monthly basis to calculate their ERU. Now, is that subjective? Yeah. I use my judgment to calculate these. If you see things on here that you don't agree with, or you know, but over in the right-hand column, if I didn't follow this formula, I told you why. You know, I told you, for example, if you would look, the Tilly's RV one, their sewer district Z, so the very last row in sewer district Z on the left side, the Tilly's RV park, no winter water use, you can kind of see that how that was calculated. And I said EAU per 2021 12-month average water use of 10,742 gallons per month. And so you'll also note that Tilly's and the RV park are one parcel. And so I divided them on the spreadsheet based on water use. The restaurant is considered 3.3 ERU. The RV park is considered 2.1 ERU for a total of 5.4 ERU. And so that 5.4 ERU number references back into the spreadsheet where we're calculating assessments, and it uses that number. So everybody that is non-residential essentially gets referenced to this little spreadsheet. And that's why I've kind of highlighted them for the council's use. So back to sheet 2 in the assessments. This future event center, they have one sewer connection, no water connection. I assume them to be 2.0 ERU, 2 equivalent residential units. They don't use any water. They're just in the process of getting developed. We did, based on their flows, provide them with a grinder station that is larger than a residential unit. In fact, it's a fairly expensive $25,000 grinder station. But they do get, you know, I'm assuming that their water use is going to be essentially 2 ERU. To me, that is fair and equitable based on what other folks are being charged. So that is the best information that I have. That's one of the few that are like that. Everybody else is really off water use, with the exception of the RV park. Everybody else we have data for. You'll also notice there are some multifamily units. So there's one in yellow there. It says duplex, triplex. That's the county's information, by the way. They're getting a sanitary service. There's 3 apartments there. Each of the apartments is 0.8 ERU. So 3 times 0.8 is 2.4 ERU. And so you can kind of see that their total assessment for that that unit for 3 apartments is $15,341. You guys all tracking with me?
Mhm.
So that's how these spreadsheets work. I know you got this by email. I don't know if you had questions or had time to look at it. Are there anything that you really, if I'm you, I would want to look at the colored ones. I kind of colored highlighted with the zoning. The rest of them are kind of non-standard. A lot of these, like if you go to River Park, there's just 85 parcel units and they're all $8,817 per parcel. They're all developed. They're easy. It's the downtown ones, it's the older areas of Orinoco that are more complicated, or the areas that we have businesses in. So like RV dealerships, for example, People's Co-op, the Possibilities Place. They're based on water use.
And that one property, that we talked about where the county has them, it's one parcel, the county is charging them both commercial and residential.
Oh,
Animal
yeah,
house
the dog
ordinance.
groomers.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we should look at that too. So that is in this area. It's on sheet 2 as well. That is, yeah, well, there's page numbers at the bottom of the spreadsheet.
so I didn't number those.
So, in the bottom middle, there's a page number 2 that I'm looking at.
Line 47.
Line 47 in the red there, and it says single family commercial, but you'll notice in the notes, it says house, dog business, non-conforming land use. And so you'll notice that they are considered one ERU, so we are essentially not assessing them for the non-conforming land use. So we, Tony and I talked about it, and we kind of think that if, at least I think that if we assess them, we're kind of validating land use for the land use. And we've recently discovered that they're non-conforming, and so we didn't
And
assess them for that land use.
well, and they are on planning and zoning meeting agenda next week.
So, and, you know, can we make modifications to this? Yeah, we can. If we're gonna increase them, though, we have to renotice them. If we're gonna decrease them, then nobody cares. Their assessments would go down, so you don't have to technically notice them.
In that one, there's just one drop, right?
Yeah, there's 1 star. Now, previously, there was 2.
Mhm.
That changed. But as we kind of figured out what was really going on there, we decided to treat that one differently because of the non-conforming land use.
Do they have water already?
No,
Well, and here's the deal.
but they are getting water. And so they get,
But only to the house.
we oversize their water service. Could it be extended there? Yeah. We don't want to get in the habit of providing one sewer and water service to multiple buildings like what happened at the Hawk property. You know, before that was just a farm, you know, it's just a farm. But that evolved over the last 10 years a lot. And then it's been parceled off and land use has changed there, and, you know, it's just different now. And so we don't want to try to perpetuate that type of thing. Everybody's supposed to have their own sewer and water service. If you've got a house, that has a sewer and water service. If you got a separate business, it's got its own sewer and water service.
Right. And I know you had said before, if at the time in the planning, if someone wanted it to their garage or something, that was the time to ask for it, but this was not part of
Well, and you know, if it's a garage, that's one thing, but if it's something that can be subdivided and split off and sold,
that. Mhm.
like happened at the Hawks property, you know, that parceled on the very South Tip down here is a auto,
Right.
auto place now.
Mhm.
They're completely separate. They don't have their own water service and they don't have any sewer service. And so now, if you look at the new map, they're getting one of each.
So the conversations with the new owners, have you had any confirmation if they're planning to live there or they just really want the business? Or is that too personal question?
Well, the house would stay residential.
Yeah.
Either for themselves or a rental.
I think they want both.
Rental. And then the business. We're doing some investigative work on that too. But here's what's really odd is, typically the county would have to have some sort of documentation to say, we're gonna tax this part of the parcel differently. There's nothing that we've recorded. They can find nothing on their end recorded to even show that. So I think that's where Joe and I kind of came to the conclusion, well, let's not give them any credence for that, but, and certainly not until planning and zoning and council moves in on that, so.
So are you talking about the business or the residents?
The barn, right?
Well, they're buying the property because it's all one parcel.
Yeah, it's just one parcel. That's the.
That's
Wow.
The conditional use permit expired in 2011.
We're back to the barn one,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
The dog
I
park.
was still on the other one because I had questions on
yeah.
it. Okay, yeah, I understand that.
So
Yeah.
I guess what, just knowing how that business is, they need water there.
Yeah, you
So
need water.
how do we propose to?
Well, I think the question is the business gonna continue to operate? It's currently non-conforming.
I think it would be really bad for Orinoco to not have that business. It's a very popular business.
Yeah.
It's a very well-used business that brings people to our town that do not live here.
I never even knew it was there.
It's a very popular boarding place.
It is done.
Really?
Full, always. Very well done there.
Wow.
They have it's like you have a first pen for your dog. They don't stay in a little kennel. They're all fed for dogs all the time. Very well done. I would hate to see it go. I think we should make it work for them.
Sure.
Planning and zoning's working on it.
But do we have to do something here tonight? Or by November, by the 1st? No, by when the letters go out, tonight.
Well,
Planning and zoning should come back to the city or to the council with what they want.
I think ultimately, if something's gonna have to change there, they're gonna have to agree to the assessment. We can modify the assessment at the November meeting if they agree to it.
But they have to go through the process.
The letter's going out now.
And
It's-
part of the reason I'm struggling with this is because it's not their fault.
No.
That any of this happened, right? They got the conditional use permit.
Wait.
We lost track of it. The county didn't, no.
Well, it wasn't a conditional use permit.
Oh, because we didn't have that at the time. We had
No,
something
we had
else.
a special exception permit.
Okay,
Yeah.
but again, not their fault. We changed our processes. Not their fault. The county didn't have record of it, right?
Well, the county wouldn't have had a record of it because it was specific to that property owner. It was non-transferable.
Yeah.
There
There were actually 6 different criteria, conditions to that permit.
Yeah, so really, when they bought it, that was null and void,
The new people, you mean,
right? Yeah,
and they actually have bought it and taken ownership.
No.
Oh.
No, this is all contingent on what
oh,
planning
that's
and
right, yeah, because they
zoning.
want to,
Okay.
Yes.
that's right, that's
I
right.
see. Okay.
Well, and I talked to this
You
lady
know,
too.
it
She was
was-
very concerned about essentially being considered 2 equivalent residential units and having to pay
Mhm.
she was, that might be a
How
deal
else
breaker
would they
for her.
expect to have water? That's a confusing situation.
Well, it depends upon what the way it's plumbed in right now, because if it's going from the house up to the barn.
It's probably a shared well. I'm sure
Yeah,
they're
but
water-
don't-
you know what I
don't
mean? I'm
where-
sure.
I didn't, get to the point where seeing that part of it, but. I mean, they've got water up there now, let's face it, so.
Right now, it's a separate well,
Oh, it's a separate well?
right, because they provide water to Ross Parker too. So they have a septic, or they have a well that services two properties, so they go to the house. the
Everybody's
barn,
just
the
doing their
Ross.
own thing over there. Unusual to
It
your
just
mind.
gets better and better.
Oh, God, I don't know.
Oh, by the way.
No more, oh, by the
Yeah, they
way.
don't have water, that's because they have a well that goes
Okay.
3 different ways.
And
Well,
there's-
And you got some on your way too, that have shared wells,
Oh, there's a lot
on
of them.
your, a lot of shared wells.
But I think,
Is there?
oh, on your side of town. there's
Oh, yeah.
That whole area, there, yeah, I've got friends that
The
have.
majority of people have shared wells over.
Really? Oh, yeah, I know, like 12 lanes.
Well, to be continued on this, I guess. Nothing I don't know how much conversation you've had about, the event center and the two ERUs, that does seem a little high to me. I kind of think of it as an event center, it's only open for events, it's only open on a few weekends.
Besides their grinder station, based on the flow that they told us, the grinder station is expensive.
So they know.
Do they, well, I don't know if they know what their ERU's calculation was. It hasn't changed from the feasibility report, so.
And because of the ERU, you have to, or I'm sorry, because of the grinder station, you have to,
It's my opinion, that's fair. And I know.
If they're
well,
oversizing the grinder station to start out with, they're looking for something else that's gonna be,
Well,
other than one.
the oversized grinder station is a function of the flow.
So it's probably they're gonna be above the one.
Well, and I think we need to keep in mind too, that it's not just the use that we see today, maybe
It's
on
projected.
weekends or something. But
because they've never been open.
right, but the potential there is, I mean, look at what you had for Gold Rush. I mean, the use on our building alone was significantly increased by traffic. And I think that's where you're going with it too, is projected use based on your.
The business is gonna grow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the way, with any business,
Right.
when you add water and sewers.
Well, and you don't design for the average day when you design sanitary sewer, you design for the peak day.
Okay.
So, Jim, you said you had some, or do others have some things? I've got a few other things I'd point out, but if you have questions on specific ones, we can look at. Otherwise, there's a few others I wanted to point out to you guys.
I couldn't
No,
read them on
I was wondering about the business, but
the Hawks one.
Yeah,
the car business, but there's a drop there.
So we are adding water service to that parcel. We are, with this project, adding that. That is one of the water services that we're adding. So we'll directional drill underneath Minnesota Avenue and put a curb stop at the property line. So he will be required to connect and reconfigure his situation there, but at the end of the day,
Where's it at?
Car repair business.
by Hawks.
Oh, it's Joe's.
yeah, it's
And that's one that will likely raise questions.
he might, but I think we've got a pretty reasonable response there. So, and kind of the reality is if they don't want to, if they weren't part of the project, their cost would be higher.
Mhm. Mhm.
Project's being subsidized to the tune of 76%. This is an area that we can add a service within the right of way. A couple other ones that I would just, well, the second page 3 of the spreadsheet deals with the Hawks property, as well as, Joseph Knauer, that's the, discount auto, so discount auto is considered one ERU, or actually, discount auto, is considered 1.7 ERU. They use a lot of water.
Hmm.
All those are metered separately. It is weird that they use a lot of water, but they do. That's what the meter says. You know, they have one water service, but they're metered separately. So,
And I'm wondering if some of these, maybe it doesn't matter, like Joe's. Is that a certified business with the county? You know, that's not for this meeting, but
so that auto machiner repair center, that's the county's land use designation.
mhm. Okay.
Most all of this information came from the county GIS site. A couple others that I highlighted, and we can talk about anything, of course, that you want. I would recommend kind of looking through these. Page 7, just point out that the city owns parcels that are getting service. Public Works Garage, Fire Department, City Hall. You have a couple vacant lots that are getting service, you're getting an assessment. So line 20, that's the Public Works building. You get an $8,817 assessment.
I'm sorry, which line was that?
20 on page 7. Also on that page is City Hall and the Fire Department, and the fire station. Grace Lutheran Church is on there.
You don't think the fire station uses a
Well, it's what?
lot of water?
Well, we can't count the water that's sold out of there, but no.
How can that be? They have meetings all the time.
Remember, this is the average water use in November, December, January. You know, and when do they meet there? Twice a week? Once a week?
Yeah, and I think it might be high because aren't the watering trucks are filling up there?
They're doing it out of the fire hydrant.
Yeah.
That's
They're
what
doing
they said.
hydrant one.
Okay,
I'm talking
I
like
thought they were.
cleaning, you know, water, you know what I mean, like cleaning up trucks and just.
Washing the trucks all the time.
They're probably using hydrant
So
one.
why is City Hall getting
Using hydrant
two
water.
assessments?
It's outside.
Ah. Makes sense. So it's
Line
only
39 and 65,
Oh, we're not doing it in winter either, so we wouldn't count those.
it's both of them for City Hall, same
Yeah.
address. One's 15,000, another one's 88,000.
Well, that's the mailing address for the owner.
Wait, what? Where are you at? What line?
Line on page 7, line 39,
Yeah,
line 65. Both of them are city or local, same address, 115 Second Street.
one
Total-
vacant land.
So you look at the PID number and that'll tell you. They're different PID numbers.
Got it, okay. So,
So yeah,
so where are you putting the service at? for-
the one on 65 is a vacant commercial land, so that's probably that, you know, those couple parcels that the developers are looking at, or was looking at.
So it's the blue. To your left. Is that up there?
No, so it's in,
It's right
so it's these parcels here.
Where are we?
across the street. That's the fire hall there. Blue, yeah.
The fire hall's here, but the parcels that the city, or the parcels the city owns are here, so 11 and 12, these two vacant
Oh.
parcels.
It's not Second Street.
That's the mailing address for the city.
Got it, okay.
It's not the mailing address, and there's no mailing address for those because they're not developed. There's nothing, the county doesn't have a mailing address for undeveloped parcels.
I don't even know what it is, just because you're memorized.
So,
You know,
I just don't know how you know what you're talking about then.
he had to fill this thing out, he knows.
I made the map. So yeah, that's the map. It would be figure 4 would illustrate that. You can see the PID numbers there. So they should reference to the PID numbers on the.
Figure 4 is on page 5, just, so you know.
right, so the service is right, okay, I see.
Well,
Okay, I got it.
I didn't know you had a cover page, I looked at it.
But there's only one service point, which is right at the driveway goes up to those parcels. It doesn't, we don't have service to the city, we don't have service to the number 12.
sure, there's service to number 12.
There's a star there.
You can see a green and a black or a blue line going to the corner of that parcel from the intersection.
Oh, there's a little blue line.
Yep.
To 755.
Yep.
Got it. Okay, at the very, on the
It's on the corner.
northwest corner.
Yep.
Got it. Okay,
That's what those little dashed lines represent.
got it.
So the green line is the gravity sewer, and the black line is the water there.
Is that parcel buildable?
Yes.
So in building number, well, we're in that area, square number 9 and number 10. It's got a star. So they'll get water.
And 2 blue dots, so
But
they
it
get
doesn't-
sewer. Now, that was an area that, those are basically those 2 storage buildings.
Mhm.
And there was quite a lot of discussion about that when the feasibility report was authored as to whether they should or should not be included. And the decision was they get service,
Sewer and water.
sewer, and well, if you're gonna have one, you really need to have the other.
One to Donald's building, one to Mrs. Anderson's building.
Yes. Yeah. So if you, yeah, they would be the vacant, probably, in fact, they're
Okay,
60, 62 and 63, I think. Yep, and then over in the right side, you'll see noted as undeveloped parcel 9 and 10.
And undeveloped just means, because
Hmm.
there's a building, so. I don't-
Yeah, probably, well, undeveloped means, that's how we characterize them, they don't have sewer and water service now. The owners would tell you that they don't need sewer and water service. We had that discussion, and the decision was they get sewer and water service.
Mhm, mhm.
So over in the legend, if you look halfway down, there's a square with a hashtag and a blue dot. In parentheses, parcels 4 through 13 are served with sewer, which is Dassos and Mrs. Anderson. There's a third one there, And then it has a star that gets water, so it gets water and sewer.
Exactly.
And 1, 2, and 3, which is on the back side of city lots, where the Lions tent was, those are considered to be,
They're undeveloped, but they have
Served
access
in
to the,
future,
yeah, they have access to the water under, I think it's 2nd Street up there. and we talked about them too. We have to cut into the street in order to connect them to the sewer and water, so we decided that we wouldn't assess them, and if they do assess, the facilities are there. It's just that, you know, the property owners never said, yeah, we want to develop there, and they're in areas where we're not necessarily doing utility improvements, and so we left them.
Can you help me, so we own 1, 2, 3, 11, 12. 5.
11, 12.
1, 2, 3, 11, 12.
1, 2, and 3 are private.
No, you don't own 1, 2, and 3. You just own 11 and 12.
Oh, Kathy and Steve own 11. You own 11 and 12, and then, okay. 11 and 12, and then is 5 the park?
No, 5 is owned by Mrs. Wimmer.
Oh.
But you're close, because it's right down there, but the park is outside the boundary,
Okay,
the black boundary.
okay. So out of everything I'm seeing here undeveloped, we own 11 and 12 on this
Yes. You'll also note that we are not serving Orinoco Park. That was a function of the archaeological study.
one.
We are gonna directional drill in the service, but they don't get a grinder station. We're not assessing.
I'll just mention it, but Carroll Calvin Park, figure number 1, page number 2. You know, right now you have it identified as city park, no sewer service, 0 ERU.
Yep.
Parks meeting last night, there were some comments made.
I can fill you in that.
Unofficially, that, go ahead.
The family of Carol Cowden is requesting to build a home on that park.
Where the park is?
Right. So obviously,
Because they donated it to the city, the family donated.
it was, well, that's still something we're trying to figure out though.
Right.
Because it was dedicated to him. They never owned the property, from my understanding.
That sounds like a sticky issue. You better get Mike involved in.
Yeah, so Sunny is trying to figure, and it was just an inquiry, and I don't know why it was just on me, but I passed it on to Sunny, and then we just, obviously P and Z will be made aware of it, but she's kind of working on how best to move forward, and
If we can.
So
if
FYI,
we even can, right?
yeah, and that's an area where it's a low pressure sewer area. So there's a lot of rock up there and changing elevations. That's why it's low pressure. So that means small diameter force main and grinder station. You can always connect to the existing force main and install that infrastructure. The water's there too,
Mhm.
but not part of the project.
Right, so it just, yeah, I think anybody would understand that.
Thanks.
So, Carol, just out of curiosity, so like collectively in our park, we do not have, other than Orinoco Park, you don't have any.
Even in Orinoco Park, you don't have. You have water there.
Yeah.
The reason Orinoco Park isn't gonna get sewer service is because we did an archaeological investigation and found, artifacts. And so excavation in the area with artifacts would be very costly to do in conjunction with this project. And so the thought process is that if we want to do that, we don't want to do it in a state federally funded project.
And like, where the gazebo, where you plan to put a gazebo, are you on water?
Yeah, like River, it'd be similar to what we have in River Park, it's just a standalone no power.
We don't have, the only park we currently have a bathroom that we needed. Is one. Otherwise, we provide porta potties, but I don't know.
I didn't know what the long range plan was either, and that's.
That's a good question. I don't know what I mean, do parks provide? bathrooms? I guess if we had like an athletic court, I guess we do have athletic courts, if we had- if we had leagues or something like that, so if you're hosting leagues, we don't really do any of that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good point.
There could be some time in the future, but right now there's no plan. I mean, we did have power. In fact, there's outlets down at the River Park gazebo, but they were turned off because when you had the light there, there's a transformer down there in River Park, but it's never been used. I don't know if it was misused in the past or.
People kept throwing rocks at the lights, breaking the light bulbs on there, right?
That and just the light in the winter time was bothering the neighbors. And that's the other reason why it was asked to be discontinued with the light. And the other thing with the light is just promoting people to stay in the park darker later in the night.
I think the dark promotion is staying on.
We digress, but there's.
So, there are a number of vacant parcels that we deem developable. We could get some pushback from them. For example, on this figure 1, these 3 properties along the river. They're getting a sewer and water assessment. That was the decision we made back when. So they.
What map, page 2?
Page 2, that's
Figure 1.
Figure 1, and where was it, Joe?
Along the river there, there's those 3 parcels up here.
Oh, yeah,
You can see them in white with the big,
yeah, the numbers.
blues, 14, 10, and 9. They're nice parcels that overlook the river. Some of them are a little bit steeper, but, we think they're developable and, could have a pretty darn nice house on it, but the other thing is the property owner might say, I have no intention of developing it, well, that's fine, but someday they're gonna sell that and they'll be developable. And the thought process at the time was, we're ripping up the street, now's the time to put the sewer and water services in, you do benefit from it, whether you use it now or later. So just so we kind of are all remembering that discussion, that is why they're there.
Why are they struggling to know that?
It's very misleading because property number 14, the person that lives in that yellow house ending in 78, they mow everything up to almost parallel to the edge of where the event center is at. So where that blue dot is at,
Yeah, it looks different.
they mow all the way up into that property where there's a wood pile. So
Okay.
that lot looks a lot better. It's really, really just on the north side of the house. So
Okay.
there is land, and that's the conversation that Joe and I had with the owner, that there is land.
Okay.
It's flat there before it drops off.
Okay. If I
Now
get
that in particular, that property doesn't get a water assessment, you'll notice, and the reason for that is the water main crosses the river there and goes right by there. So we don't have to cut into the road to extend water to them.
so they can, whenever.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's the difference in that parcel 14. Parcel 10 and 9 are different because the water and sewer are in the street. So nothing easy here. I would also draw your attention to Tilly's. I mentioned the fact that their parcel includes the RV park and the restaurant. The total ERUs is 5.4. They have 2 sewer connections, but 5.4 ERUs. Their total assessments, pretty significant, about $33,470. So,
Where's is that?
page 11, bottom of page 11. But That's actually less than was projected in the feasibility report because the water usage dropped a little bit there.
Okay.
We could spend all night looking at these. Is there any that you guys wanna pull out right now, or feel free to look through it as you have time? Call with questions or concerns. And so that gets us to the resolution. So the resolution talks about the fact that we're having a meeting on November 1st at 7 o'clock. It will be here. We'll have it available via Zoom, but also available for people to come and attend in person. We will mail a notice and we will publish a notice. The published notice is Exhibit A. The mailed notice is Exhibit B. If the mailed notice contains everything that the published notice does. So let's take just a minute and look at the mailed notice. So the mailed notice is Exhibit B. It says that in the upper right-hand corner if you're following me. So this,
Page 9.
this,
11.
Digital.
oh,
Available.
yeah, this notice is essentially a 4-page mailed notice. And so the red text is populated by the spreadsheet. Okay, so the taxpayer address, whatever, the parcel number, the parcel street address if it has one. And then we kind of go through and provide the information that is required by statute. Okay, and so we talk about the time and place. The assessment roll is available at the city, the city administrator will have that, has that, along with the figures. We can answer any questions that people have. The improvements, this is the same description of the improvements that we've kind of used in the past. Specific amount to be assessed on page 2. We kind of talk about the basis of assessment here and the term of the assessment and the interest rates in the upper 3 paragraphs. And then the very bottom of the page, you'll see that your wastewater system fee assessment is, and then spreadsheet column AS. And then your parcel is considered to be, 1 ERU or 2 ERU or whatever the spreadsheet says it is. Because I think that, we're giving them the assessment rates. We need to tell them what they're considered. And we do the same thing for the water in terms of the assessment in column AT, and the parcel number ERUs is in column AO. And then the total wastewater system and water system fee assessment is column AU. So everybody will have, they'll know their assessment, right? And they know the interest rates and they know the terms if they read this. And then we kind of go on and we talk about prepayment, same verbiage that's in what we talked about earlier tonight. In the next one, the total amount of the proposed assessment, there's $5.3 million that is being assessed to all the property owners. And that's 11.5% of the project cost for the residents in Orinoco. Now that's a little bit different than the number that we had in the other one. And the reason is that was the project cost for all of the project that includes Orinoco Estates. And so this is just the city of Orinoco and the residents that live here, excluding Orinoco Estates. So that's why that number's, I think the other one was 13%. Written or oral objections.
So here it says written or oral, and the other thing in the project summary, it just says written.
Does. This is,
Okay.
out of the league stuff.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, like, that's fine, I just wanted to make sure, like, that we're,
Well, and I think that,
accepting
The other one's going to the courts.
yeah,
And the red one would be to the judge.
no, they have to do it to us first.
well, and I think that, you know,
At that hearing.
you can come and voice your objections or concerns. People will do that. You don't necessarily have to file
Uh-huh.
or submit a written objection with the intent of appealing
Okay.
your
But they-
assessment.
But they can't move on, generally. They're not
Supposedly.
supposed to move on if they haven't done that.
Right, and so that limitation of appeal is discussed, it's
Okay.
verbatim there.
That's fine, it's just that in the other thing we read earlier, it just said written. It did not say written.
Yeah, and it's, in fact, the limitation to appeal says unless a written objection signed by the affected property owner is filed with the municipal administrator prior to the assessment hearing or presented to the presiding officer at the hearing. So there, it does say that. So, you know, I think this is just saying you can come up and say your piece and
But if you want to take action, you
you
put
better
it
Put
on
it in
paper.
writing.
And then we talk about the deferment. Again, the same, literally the same information
Mhm.
is included there. And then, of course, it's signed by Sonny.
So I have a few questions for both the mail and the public. So we'll just stick with the mail one since we're already on that one. So on page 2, under specific amount to be assessed. In the second paragraph, can you just explain, it's confusing to me how it talks about the first of the installments to be payable on or before the first Monday in January 2023, and shall bear interest as the, then payment for assessment installments will be incorporated into the property tax statement for May and October.
So I think that leads to the fact that the assessments are active and the interest starts to accrue January 1st.
In January. Is there a different way we could word that? Because doesn't it seem to me that we'll be paying that on January?
Well,
on the
we
first
did,
Monday? Like, we'll be, doesn't it sound like that? Like, we'll be requiring payment.
so
We talked about this.
everything but the last sentence is what the league tells you to say. And so we agree that this is confusing, so we added the last statement.
Okay.
So why,
That payment of the assessment installments will be incorporated in the Homestead County property tax statement payable in May and October of each year.
Can we just say installments will begin instead of to be payable? Because that's not true.
Uh,
To begin?
so you make a good point. We had this discussion that what prompted this last sentence was the same comment I had.
But I mean,
And
even me, who I clearly understand that this is obviously gonna come out of our, people are gonna look at this and 100% think that they are going to owe us money on January 20, or on that first Monday in January.
So I would like to ask if we could, sometimes we underline things to emphasize. So could we underline that last sentence? So, and I agree with you, it's the payable and it's the LMC wording, and that's fine, but if we were to underline that payment for assessment is underlined in both that paragraph and the paragraph right below it, to me, that it would,
I hate it. This is terrible.
Yeah.
The first of the installments to be payable, and then we say,
It's written by
that
an
would
attorney.
emphasize.
That's
Well-
the deal.
that doesn't make it okay.
Well,
And that is probably why it's confusing.
that is why it's confusing.
So,
But that is literally the league, this is what they tell you to say. They have templates
are
that,
they our boss? Do we have to do what they say?
well, you don't have to
I
listen to
mean,
the
can't
journals.
we help our,
Well, they're-
can't we help
I'll
I
people?
think it's a good
They're our
idea rather
insurance
than.
policy holder.
Can't we,
The
They're the
underlining, I
attorneys.
think it's good. The underlining.
they're still gonna, people are still going to see that and think that they owe us, that they're gonna be worried, like, how much do I owe? Well, how do I pay it?
Provides all that information though. I mean, how much do they owe? Well, keep
No,
reading.
but, well, sure, but I don't know, I just feel like that,
In fact, that sentence should have been added to the water paragraph below it too.
yes,
So it's in both paragraphs.
I have it both, I have it marked, I don't know. This is my biggest thing today when I was reading through these. I'm like, I just don't like the wording. I think it's poorly done. I think it's confusing to most people who aren't taking part in any of these conversations, which is 99.9% of the population of this town. And they're going to only see this and think, I have to pay something on that date. I don't know.
I'd like to see either underlined or in bold or something, just to draw attention to that sentence that we're adding. Because I think if it's bold or underlined, it's gonna draw more attention. I think everybody understands, at least I'd like to think everybody understands, when you see assessments, it's on your property tax. Just like street assessments, it goes on your property tax.
I don't know if everybody does, because not everybody's lived in a town before, and we don't generally assess people who are no-go. I mean, the only time we have is for water and that, you know what I mean?
Well, can we call the LMC and ask them for clarification or any modification to take out some of the verbiage about payable?
I just think that to be, you know,
Or assessments start on the first Monday in January.
Right. It's not to be payable. That makes 0 sense. That's not even correct. It's not to be payable.
Well, it's referring to, because your assessments follow the calendar year.
So like,
So it's,
they start to be incurred on that day,
Right.
but they're not paid. You don't get payment on that day. And payable means,
The first of the installments interest
I don't know, that lawyer needs
begins.
maybe that attorney's not even there anymore. Do you want me to ask Mike? Do you want me to call the lead? What's council direction?
I
Do you
see.
want Joe to do
I
it?
will
Or
ask
do you
you.
want to just fix
fix it, honey. Like I ask you all the time. Joe's shaking his head at me over there.
Put verbiage in there
Well,
just to make them.
we're dealing with days and hours of any corrections being added because they are
Right.
working on the package already. So I guess I would ask you to call, in my opinion, to call LMCIT and ask them for whoever we need to call and find out what leeway we have in the language.
I can do that because
Thank you.
it could very well be that, you know, as part of this toolkit, you know, we're not the only.
This is the
questioning
language people
this.
use.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
I can
doesn't mean
appreciate,
that we can't change it. I'm just saying that.
Yeah.
When I do these, this is the language we use in most places. Because that's what the attorneys will tell you to do.
I mean, if the attorneys say that's it,
It
then
is confusing. I
then we
agree.
underline the last statement or bold or something. but
Yeah,
we
I
don't
think
take that
that's a good
statement
way to do it too. Make it bold,
It is confusing.
make it in bold, okay, and then put
Well-
that also.
But you could say that for a number of things in here and how it's written. I wouldn't write it like
But
that.
I also, I think if you never bring anything up and never challenge it, it will never change. And I think this is exactly one of the reasons people don't read this stuff, because it doesn't make sense. So,
To me, I would rather it be understandable by our
Yeah.
residents.
Yeah.
You know, and still be viable in terms of the legal,
Yeah.
the legal path, but
just.
That's why we need to talk to LMC,
yeah.
because we can't really change anything without their approval, in my opinion. Because they're, you know, if somebody sues us, that's who we go to, and then attorney's gonna say, well, why did you change your language? Well,
Yeah,
We need
I'm
to
not
take
comfortable
ourselves-
changing it. I mean, if they want to give us guidance on how to change it, that's fine. Or if we want to supplement it.
I'm
but-
fine with
That's
that
all my
too.
checklist.
If
What's that?
they say, no, this is what we say, and then.
Yeah.
This is how we always done it, so we just have to keep doing it. Whatever, I hate that answer, but then I do think we should insist on underlining that last sentence and adding to
Want
The
to
sentence
underline it, or you want to make it bold? I think bold
Whichever.
will give your,
Bold or-
draw your
yeah.
attention to it. So,
bolder underlined and add it to the water one too.
So Sunny, we have on the agenda approving the resolution, and the resolution's an exhibit. So how do we approve the resolution?
You would do it as amended to include this.
So we need to make sure we include that motion or that
Oh, we
commentary.
haven't
wasn't
gotten,
worth
we haven't gotten there yet. have we?
Okay, the one other, I'm sorry, have you finished?
Uh-huh.
No, go ahead.
No, I think so.
Really?
That's amazing. Thank you. Dana with the question. Yes, I really think I am. Until we get to the resolution.
Oh, there it is.
Counselor Phillips, you have
Yes,
anything?
On page,
I agree with what, and I just want to have it highlighted. You know, in bold, but otherwise. I
In
think
bold?
Yeah,
Okay,
it's also on page 9, which is the notice of public hearing assessments.
Who's page 9? Is it Sunny's page 9?
Sunny's page 9, attached with the agenda, it's that first paragraph.
Yeah, it's the same language as in the published notice as well.
Yeah.
We want to make sure you hold it.
That's why I thought we were looking at the
So I think it just calls it out.
I lied about not having another question.
I knew that. I knew that.
There's exhibit A.
And that's
we got
because
exhibit A,
it's-
exhibit G.
okay, so you gotta do it also on the water too on that one, right?
Mhm. I got exhibit A. And I don't even see this in exhibit B. But could you explain to me in on the page 9, I guess, it would be. So the first installment shall be added interest on the entire assessment from the date of the assessment resolution. That's just very confusing. Could you just explain that to me real quickly?
Yeah, you or me.
The third
You,
paragraph,
it's the, yeah, mid-page there on my page, number 9. Upper right-hand corner,
So it's right. Are you talking about that?
Right
same
below
verbiage?
the other stuff. we were
upper
just
right-hand
reading.
corner. Right,
The number 9 of yours.
okay.
that's your 2052 or 2053.
2043, 2053.
Or with both.
2040.
So to the first installment,
One's
Shall
for
we-
water, one's for sewer, so.
added interest to the entire assessment from the date of the assessment resolution until the end of the term of the assessment, essentially, is what that's saying. So for the sewer, you have a 30-year assessment window, and so it's saying that from the date that the assessment's adopted for the next 30 years, you're gonna incur interest on that balance.
And the other one says 20, right?
Right, but then why,
Yeah.
so there's the first sentence and then there's the last sentence, to each subsequent installment when due shall be added interest for 1 year and all unpaid. So is that like a? Those are two, it almost seems like we're charging interest twice.
I think the interest is done on a yearly basis. And so that's how they tried to do it.
And I also think that they say if you want to come in and pay off your assessment on March 3rd,
You gotta pay for the
whenever,
year.
you're gonna pay the whole year's interest. You're not gonna pay part of it. I think that's what that's saying, but that's another example of this is what and how the league tells you to say it.
Yeah, so it's not prorated.
Right,
It's not prorated. It's you,
Right here.
if
That's
on
the way I read it.
January 3rd, you come in and pay that assessment off, you pay interest for
The entire
11 and, 9/10 of a month,
Mhm.
Mhm.
is I think what that's saying.
We're all just guessing.
Doesn't seem right, but
It just seems strange because it's saying it'll be all, it's right there, it'll be added to the entire assessment and it even gives us the date. But then this last sentence is what subsequent installment when due. So they're just saying each time you pay twice a year, there'll be interest added to that. It's just a
No,
weird way of
I-
saying
I
there'll be
think
interest
it's a-
added.
It's saying just for the payoff is what it is. Okay, so we're gonna talk about the installment, I think. On a 1-year
Subsequent
basis, Yeah, and so
Yeah, that the interest can be added.
it's gonna be on a yearly basis and, you know, whatever it is for that year. That's how they worded it.
But that's below. That's in the next paragraph. That's all explained in the next paragraph.
Remember, this is lawyers talking.
Well, I mean, okay, if we're fine with it, I would just like to put out clear information to our residents, and that's not what we're doing, and it bugs me.
Well,
Does it not bug anybody else?
Well, no, let's go get a lawyer and they'll tell you that's fine.
I'm sure they will, but I mean, how many lawyers do we have living in town that are gonna read this?
Yeah, and
I don't think you're gonna have that many people.
I'm with you. I would rather it be understandable, but if we have to do this from a legal standpoint, then maybe, you know, is there something else that we can add to it, or, I don't know.
I don't know.
Because if.
Well,
it's-
or let's see if it becomes an issue with people.
Well, that,
Questions,
that's
you
just
know,
it.
I mean,
Well, and
We
people-
can't even answer the questions.
Well, people can call and ask, and we.
What are we gonna
We
say?
can have an answer ready. once we
well,
find out.
it's gonna be for that
Well,
year.
I do think that we understand what the intent is, whether we
yeah.
understand exactly how that's written and what it's getting at, I guess, is debatable.
Then, you know what we can do, we can have them call League, so you can have that next one.
Yeah.
All right, sorry, I'm wasting everybody's time, but I'm struggling to understand some of this verbiage, and I don't love that.
it might be at the public hearing.
Should be,
It should be.
police should be there too. I'm serious.
Gets that filing, huh?
I-
Gets people
I
that
don't
work
want it
with
to be,
No, I think deputy should be.
police
yeah.
should be there,
It makes sense, but have you ever seen it happen?
yes,
Really?
police should be there.
It just calms everything down for the
Yes.
sheriff.
Just presence.
Because I have visions of,
None of us need to.
it's kind of like when you see the stake in your front yard, if you're gonna dig my yard up, it gets everybody's attention. Now we're talking dollars, and
Yep.
you're talking 15,000 or 30,000.
Or 8,000, 8,872.
If I can just say, add to this, it's the difference between December 31st and January 1st. When things change, it's kind of like, you're gonna pay through the year, but the calculation on interest is always in advance. So even like on your mortgage,
Mm.
you know, your monthly mortgage payment, the
Yeah,
interest is
calculated
calculated for the
prospectively.
entire amount, yeah.
Yeah.
If that helps. That would be good, but
Okay,
Counselor Richards, did you have any questions?
I do not.
Mayor?
I'm fine. I just want to circle back to the sentence that we were adding about payment for assessments, that we're going to bold it. Is that correct?
Yes.
And do we still want to go back to the LNC to get clarification on the, if there's any other variation of the wording about the collection payable on or before the first month here? Just do that in bold.
if there's time, I would love that. I just think it would be helpful.
Well,
If we have time.
and I'm just thinking, you know, I can make a phone call. If nothing else, when people ask me or Renee the question, you know, we can say,
Yes,
Yes.
you know.
and
here's
that's
for
right too.
clarification.
We can all
Yeah, so
understand.
try.
Yeah,
Either way, yes or no.
And if
Yes,
you-
we can. Here's what we want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or no.
But I still think we should have the bold put in there. on
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
It's
I agree.
gotta be
Yeah.
that'll correct a lot of it.
Yeah, we can try for new verbiage, but if we can't, at least, or if they don't get back to you, or whatever the case might be, at least then have an answer waiting,
Yeah,
because you'll get phone calls.
Yeah. rather be proactive.
Well, if we can try to have that sorted out by noon tomorrow, is that reasonable? Because we've got a lot of stuff to send out here.
I know.
And
Mayor, did
then-
you have anything else?
No.
Oh, okay.
Just circling back to that, so.
I have just one thing.
So you make a motion?
Well, Sunny has something.
Oh,
Sorry. And on the resolution, Exhibit A and Exhibit, those two, the resolution and the Exhibit A, we refer to the Phase 1A wastewater system and water distribution improvement. But then on Exhibit B, it's Phase 1A wastewater and water system. So it's just a,
We should just make it the same.
just, I'm just thinking it's a tweak.
When it comes to the resolution, I just have a quick question about number 5. And the chapter assessment differs from the proposed assessment. Maybe what, can you explain that to me? What is my example of that?
One more time, please.
Number 5 on the resolution. If the adaptive assessment differs from the proposed assessment.
So that, for example, we determined that there was an error in the number of ERUs for your lot. And we correct that error, and your assessment increases by whatever. We would have to notice you of that change.
Okay.
But if the error was in your favor, for example, we had you at 1.5 ERU, and you were really 1, and your assessment decreases as a result of correcting that error, then we don't have to notify you. Because your assessment is essentially going down. Now, we could do that as a courtesy, but we're not required
I
to
don't,
notify you. You'd be happy with
okay.
your assessment.
Yeah,
I don't,
you'll see it.
I don't see that. And that's number 5. I mean, that's not what I. To me, it sounds like it differs in any way
Well,
that you're gonna do that.
I guess if that's the way it reads, that's what we can do.
This template
Say
also
go up or
came
down.
from the toolkit.
It did not
Oh, okay.
come from the toolkit. They don't have an example for this. So this came from another project.
If we want to just do the increase, I think we should probably put it in.
No, I'm not anticipating that happened anyway.
Oh.
It could.
I mean, this affects people, we have to, you know what I mean?
Well, I'm big on transparency, so I'd like to do either way.
Yeah.
Or down.
and number 5, if you want to do word city. Administrator.
Oh.
Number 14. Should we make a motion to adopt this resolution 2022-24? As amended, with the changes we discussed.
Second. A second.
I second it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
As important as this resolution is, do we need to put the street address for City Hall? Any place?
I don't know why, 'cause we're not publishing this piece.
That's fine, I just,
We are
This is just for our-
publishing these other.
This is just for our own internal use.
Well, and I'm guessing that the county may want a copy of this too. We did on the preliminary tax.
just basically.
Yeah.
Okay,
And again, I'm sorry, just to be clear, we're going to bold that I'm gonna check with LMC to see if we can change it in language. If not, we can go with folding that one sentence that we added
In
by tone.
in both exhibit A and exhibit B, in both the wastewater and the water.
Well, of course, they need to give us a recommendation on what to change the language to.
If we change it,
Right,
but we're
right.
definitely holding it. No matter what.
And with that, then do we just say based on that, on their changes, if any, it's okay, or do we have to bring that all back?
As a
And
member,
we'll,
Well, I'm gonna say that final thing would be a further result of the city administrator and her designee is authorized to take steps necessary for the implementation
there you
of this resolution. I think we're covered.
go. Okay, good.
But I want to make sure
Just wanna-
and then we're gonna change that one exhibit B system to
Right.
distribution.
System.
Okay.
Any other comments? Seeing none, all by voice vote.
Mayor Highcourse,
Aye.
Councilor Berger,
Aye.
Councilor Phillips,
Aye.
Councilor Richard.
Aye.
Councilor Phillips. All right.
Thanks, Joe.
So Sonny, you'll handle the publication.
Exhausted.
That'll work.
Yes. And they can send that to the, we have that published with the changes that we talked about, you know, handling the mailing piece, so as soon as we can get that to me.
And I will, I'll make a phone call right away in the morning and.
Thank you, Joe. for all your
So
work.
And I, again, Joe, I'm just gonna say, oh, we adjourned.
No, I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
This is 7:57.
I just wanna again thank you for, I should have done that on record.
Oh, I
mean,
have it.
This is a lot of work and I appreciate that you,
For sure.
We're getting there.
I also wanted, I should have done this on the record, but, you know, speaking of all the,
I'm still
Funding.
taping.
funding that was, you know, came from the state, I want to thank you for doing all of that work up at the Capitol. For making this an affordable option for our users. So, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
I am gonna run.
thank you. Do you need this?
Oh, so you said I make no